name is Tony, and I'll be teaching you bass clarinet this week. So what we'll be doing today is we're going to be learning the concert B flat major 5-note scale, and then I'll be giving you some practice tips along the way. So let's get started. So we're just going to start with measure 1. It's easy enough, just 4 quarter notes, and it starts on C. So here, let me lift this up so you can see it. It's going to be your back thumb, 1, 2, 3 in your left hand. It's going to go C, D, E, F. Easy as that. That's the first measure, so it's just C, D, E, F. So what's going to happen is I'll play it first, and then we'll play it together. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and we're going to breathe on 4. Okay? So I'm going to go first. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, now we're going to do it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome, that was really good. So now we're gonna go to measure 2 and we're gonna do it again. So measure 2, so same rhythm that we've seen, but the notes are a little different. So we start on G, so that's open, nothing, and then we go F, E, D, and then we'll go down to the C and hold it for 4 counts. All right, so C, F, E, D, C, and then make sure we hold it out for all 4 beats of the whole note. All right, ready? I'm gonna go first and then we'll play it together. 1, 2, 3. Awesome, you ready? We're gonna play it together now. Make sure you're sitting up nice and tall, mostly so you can reach your bass because it's tall. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. So before we play the whole thing, we're gonna go through. If you see, there's a difference between measures 1 and then measure 2, because the first measure is all tongued, so all 4 notes are tongued. And then if you look at measure 2, all the notes are slurred. So it's a little different. It makes a difference in the sound. So the first measure is tongued, so it sounds like this. But the second measure, since it's slurred, sounds like this. All right. So we have to make sure that we hear a difference, because if you tongue it, there's a slight separation in between all the notes, but when there's a slur, they're just straight through all the way down. You don't hear any separation in between the notes. We make sure we slur all the way down to the whole note C, and we go over the bar line. I know you kind of want to tongue on the downbeat after the bar line, but we have to make sure we go all the way through. So we're going to do the whole thing, all right? So we're going to start at measure 1 and go all the way through. I'll go first, and then you can play with me. 1, 2, 3. All right, ready? If you feel like you need to go over and practice anything, or you just want to play through it quick, you can just pause the video, but otherwise, we're gonna get to it right now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome, that was so good. So now we know the whole concert B flat 5-note scale. So you might be asking yourself, well, if it's concert B flat, why are we starting on C? That's just how it is when you play clarinet. It's a pretty complicated answer, but you do have to start on the note C, which we did. So now you know the concert B flat scale. So now we're gonna be going over some practice tips that I wish I knew. And I'm gonna try to do it more towards the bass clarinet, since this is your bass clarinet lesson. So, first things first is, maybe you didn't start on bass clarinet. If you started on B flat, the regular clarinet, you know that it's pretty different. First of all, it's way bigger than the regular clarinet. So first things first, you have to push so much more air through this instrument than you would your regular clarinet. So that's the first thing you gotta practice, is you just gotta practice blowing a ton of air through this instrument. it's really big. It's almost as big as me. It's pretty big. So you got to make sure that you have enough air to go through it. So when you first pick it up, it's going to be a little hard because you're not used to just pushing this much air through an instrument to get it to play. So it's all right if it starts off a little wonky. I know I sure did. And also, don't be afraid. The bass clarinet has a mind of its own, so it's going to squeak all the time. I'm sure you heard when I was playing earlier, did a little squeak. Happens to everybody, trust me. So just let it happen, and that's just what it is. So another thing for the bass clarinet is you have to get used to how far apart your fingers have to be. Because if you're playing your regular clarinet, your fingers are way more closer together, and it feels more comfortable. But when you go to the bass clarinet, the keys are way farther spaced out. So you're probably going to feel really awkward when you're playing it at first, just because you feel like it's huge. Like you have to feel like you're stretching your hands way more, and it's probably not the most comfortable thing to begin with. So all I would do is practice your scales. It really helps on the bass. I know we should be practicing our scales anyway. And I know they can be boring, but it's super helpful to get your hands used to how the bass clarinet feels, because it feels way different than the regular clarinet if you started on the regular clarinet. If you started on bass clarinet, just practice your scales anyway, because you should be practicing your scales. But just to talk about scales, you should practice them. They're very helpful. I know it's a drag to practice them. They can be really boring, but make sure that you switch it up to keep yourself interested. Make sure you can just play a scale or two a day. Switch it up, alternate which scales you play every day, so you're not playing all the scales every single day all the way through. That would be exhausting. And it makes your band music way easier to play. So say you have this crazy hard part and it looks really hard and you're so scared and you're like, well, I'm going to practice this so much, but then you go through it and it's basically just a scale. So that makes it so much easier, because if you know how to play the scale, you don't really have to practice it as much. So that's a plus for playing the scales. And you can change up the rhythms for the scales. You don't have to play it in quarter notes like we did. If you want to switch it up and make a little song out of it, you can do that. I know I used to do that. You can switch up the articulations, like when we did our scale, instead of measure 1 tonguing it and measure 2 slurring it, you could switch it if you want. I know people who have even done every couple notes they switch, so like maybe slur 2 notes and then tongue 2 notes, switch it up, make it interesting. Another thing I have for the bass clarinet specifically is what you might have to do is, if you're a shorter person, you might have to find something to sit on so you can boost yourself up. Because if you see where I have my bass, if I sit up straight, you have to sit up straight. With the bass clarinet, you have to sit up straight. So you can see that it lands right on my lip, so I can very comfortably just put my mouth on the mouthpiece, and then we'll just start playing. But say it was like up a little farther like this, then I'd have to start stretching, and then that makes it very uncomfortable, and your neck's gonna hurt after a while, and you just won't sound as good as you usually do. So make sure that if you need that, it's plenty people do, or you can find something to stick under the bass clarinet on the bottom, something flat, like a little piece of wood or anything like that, to just make sure that you boost it up a little bit. I know this bass clarinet, along with a lot of other bass clarinets, have this little peg on the bottom. So if it's too short, like if you need it to come up higher, you can make it come up higher or down lower. So you're probably gonna have to make it go way down to the bottom, just because you're probably not done growing yet. So you probably, at least you're hoping you're gonna get a little taller. So you're probably gonna need to put it down pretty far. But it also depends on the chair you're sitting in. Some chairs are higher and lower than others, so it might be good to just have something like that around so you can make sure that you can always play your bass wherever you are. Okay, so what else? Other practice tips are making sure that just playing, I give you a way to practice without actually playing your bass, which is pretty cool. So one way to practice without actually playing the bass is just fingering through. So if you're practicing your scales, like right now, you can see I'm fingering through my C major scale. I'm getting practice in the scale. I'm going through it, I'm playing all the right notes. So that way, if you're not feeling so good or you're kind of busy and you just don't have time, so you can go through that and you can do that. That's a really great way to get some practice time in without actually having to play. Another way that you can do that is if you take a little pencil and you put your fingers on it Now, this is better for like the regular clarinet because it's closer in size, but it'll still work. It'll still do it. So you can go through and you can practice fingering it, and it's like you're playing a clarinet. You just imagine all the keys are there, and you can go through and just play everything like that. So you can play your C major scale and anything like that. So, other practice tips are when you're playing your band music, another really easy way to practice without playing is I like to do this specifically when we just get a piece and I'm just starting to learn it. I'll take my instrument and my music home, and what you can do is you can take out your music and you go on YouTube and look up a recording of the piece and you just listen to the piece and you can try to finger along. Because that way, if your band director gives it to you and you're trying to sight read it, people are just trying to play the right notes, trying to keep up, and it's probably really slow. You don't really know what it sounds like. So if you take it home, you can figure out what it sounds like and figure it out on your own. You can go through and mark in what seems hard, like, oh, this seems like a lot of runs. I'll have to practice that. Or, oh, this part is really fast, so I'll have to make sure that I can practice it fast enough so I can keep up. So things like that. That's another pretty easy way to do it. Another thing that you can do is during rehearsal. We all have those rehearsals where the band director is working with a different section and doesn't really have anything to do with you, and you're kind of getting bored. So a way to make sure that you're staying engaged and entertained through rehearsal is if the band director is working with another section and that also doesn't apply to you. You can go through your music and just sit there and finger along and play along. You can go through your scales, see if you have them memorized. You can just finger through and make sure, because this way you're not distracting from rehearsal, but you're also getting something out of it and keeping yourself occupied. That's pretty important, because the first thing we tend to do during rehearsal, if we start to get bored, is we want to talk to the people around us. And we all know that band directors do not like when we talk during rehearsal, right? So if you do this is a really good way to make sure that you're still, you're not totally bored, you're doing something. And even if the band director is rehearsing with another section and you have that same thing and they haven't gotten to you yet, you can just finger along with them so you know where they're at in the music, so you don't have to forget where they are and now you have to try to find it again. They'll be ready to go, get some extra practice in, and it'll be super easy. All right. Another practice tip that I wish I knew is that if you have this really long, 16 measure hard part in your music that you're just like, this is so hard, I have to practice it, what you can do is if it's 16 measures, like I said, you can break it down into chunks. So say you can break it down into 4 measure chunks, and then so what you can do is you just go measure by measure. Those first 4, just go measure 1, measure 2, measure 3, measure 4 individually. And then after you learn those and you feel like you have that under your fingers, you can put together measures 1 and 2 and play those 2 together. And then you could put measures 2 and 3 together and play those together, and then 3 and 4. And then after that, you can go and play all 4 measures together. So that way you learn 4 whole measures. And if you feel like you're on a roll and want to keep going, you can keep doing that in the 4 measure chunks, or you can save it for another day and just do 4 measures a day. And then after 4 days of practicing, you'll have that whole thing down. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me. But a really important thing is that once you do learn that super hard part, you go and you practice it and you're like, yeah, I know it, you have to keep playing it. Because let's say that your band director only gets to this piece maybe once a week, and you practice this and you know it, and then you only play it once, you don't play it for another week after that, you're probably going to forget some of it, and then you have to relearn it, which is not great, because you already spent all that time practicing it, and why would you go back and do it again? So make sure, what I like to do is if I have a part like that I know is hard and I spent a long time practicing, what I'll do is that's the first thing I'll play. When I go to sit down and practice, I'll take that out and I'll just play straight through it to make sure I still know it. So either 1, it'll go great and then I can move on, or 2, I might mess up a little bit somewhere and I'm going to go, oh, I need to practice right here. And then you can brush up one little spot and then try it again, and then you'll probably be good to go. But as you get closer to your concert or anything, and as you get more comfortable with it, you definitely don't need to do it every day. In the beginning, I would definitely recommend doing it every day. Super important. But once you get farther along, you could probably do it every other day, and then every 2 days, just until you feel like, yeah, once you pick it up and you can play it down and you feel like you don't need to do it anymore, that's okay. But in the beginning, you should definitely be practicing it a lot, all the time. Yeah? Awesome. So that's so before we end this lesson, we're going to go back and we're going to play the scale one more time, concert B flat or RC major scale, just to make sure you don't forget it. Like I said, taking those practice tips. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing we did before, just to review. So we'll do measure 1 separate, and then we'll do 2 and 3, and then we'll just play it all the way through. All right? So make sure that you wet your reed. Another practice tip is if you haven't been playing for a while, and you know when you haven't played for a while and you sit there, and then all of a sudden you have to play and it sounds like your clarinet isn't working, and you're like, why isn't my clarinet working? It's probably just because your reed got dry. So just take it off the clarinet and wet it again. I like to do both sides of the reed. You don't really need to. It's just something I do. So make sure you take your time with this because you definitely don't want to break your reed. So you just stick it back on and line it up. It's a little harder to line up the reed on a bass clarinet because you can't really see it as well. So what I like to do is I'll tilt it forward like this, and then you can get underneath it and then see better where it is. That's what I like to do. And you take your time and you line it up. All right, there we go. Sorry, my reed does not want to cooperate. We all know what that's like. All right, here we go. So now we're going to get back to the scale. So I'm going to play measure 1 by itself just to review, and then we'll play it together, all right? Make sure we tongue it. Make sure you get a really good breath, and make sure we're sitting up straight. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Ready? We're going to do it together now. 1, 2, 3. Good. All right, so now we're going to do measures 2 and 3. Same thing as before. Ready? Me first. 1, 2, 3. All right, now we're going to do it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, now we're going to do the whole thing. I'm going to do it, and then we're going to do it together just like we've been doing. If you want to go through it again or practice anything, you can just pause the video and do it whenever you need to. So I'm going to go first. All right, let's do it together now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Well, that's all for today's lesson. I'll see you next week, and happy practicing. Bye.